by the Central People's Government is a push for innovation. And these pushes for innovation are expressed in central documents to promote indigenous innovation in the 12th five-year plan, which is 2011-2015, calling for bolder steps in reform and innovation. Reform meaning particularly reform in business models. Often what is meant but not expressed is reform in the state-owned, state-operated sector, which is often highly favoured, both politically and financially and managerially, as compared with the purely private sector, particularly SMEs. The 2006 plan was the original blueprint, and it's still the case that the plan tries to favour what is called indigenous innovation by giving priority in government procurement to goods which are certified as being indigenous innovations. And there is actually a certification system for indigenous innovations. And finally, there are ambitious goals for patent registration and protection. And I'd like to talk a bit about each of these elements, because each element, in a way, contains the seeds of failure. The weaknesses are defensiveness. I'll explain these a little bit later. Obsession with intellectual property, and particularly with patents. A failure to look at the root causes of failure innovation, which can be found in the education system. And finally, a lack of access to capital. Local innovation is looked at by the leadership as a way to block foreign influence and domination. I think of the elements that one looks for in trying to promote creativity and innovation, one of the elements is a hero. We look to a role model. We look to the Steve Jobs, or we look to Albert Einstein, or we look to some role model. This is one of the components that we could put into our recipe in generating innovation. And in China, the national leaders and the stance taken by the national leaders is hugely influential. However, in my personal view, they're hugely off message. We have President Hu Jintao, who says, for example, we must clearly see that international hostile forces are intensifying the strategic plot of westernizing and dividing China, and ideological and cultural fields are the focal area of their long-term infiltration. It's actually extraordinary that this man, who's no fool, should be saying things like that this year. What he is actually trying to do is to use innovation to create another Great Wall of China. We already know about the Great Firewall of China. The objective of the Great Firewall of China is to create a situation where they hope that China can absorb data and knowledge from outside, but things can't get from inside to outside. Particularly, and this is the result of research that was published 2 weeks ago. The Great Firewall of China, the objective is not so much to stifle criticism of the Communist Party in China. There is plenty of criticism of the Communist Party in China, which is available to everyone. The objective is to suppress the formation of peer groups who might cooperate together to do absolutely anything. Because it is assumed that these peer groups, if they come together, will come together with the object of overthrowing the Communist Party. So if the peer group is coming together for the purpose of sharing knowledge, or for a knowledge sharing objective, they will also be suppressed by the Great Firewall of China. One of the great failures, therefore, is the failure to promote sharing and the coming together of groups, the defensive nature of the Chinese innovation policy. The next is the obsession with intellectual property as a driving force in the innovation process. This is a quote from the State Intellectual Property Office. The trouble has arisen, firstly, because the Chinese government, under pressure from the United States and the US Special 301 process, focused considerably on intellectual property as a national issue. And intellectual property compliance was one of the primary issues deciding whether China could or could not join the WTO. The other thing is that in the minds of Chinese officials, the only measurable in creativity is the registration of intellectual property, particularly patents. What this means, I mean, if we look at Giovanni's 6 E's, there is no doubt that there is energy in the creative process in China, but it has been hijacked. It has been hijacked into the patent system. In the patent system, the definition of creative and innovation is in a straitjacket. The straitjacket of whether it is part of the prior art or whether it is a genuine innovation, the straitjacket of how significant compared to other innovations it is, whether it is a genuine inventive step, and whether it is capable of being put into practice by somebody who is versed in that technical art. Nearly all creative processes in China, under the national strategy, are forced into that process. Therefore, for example, innovation in services, which are not protected by any form of intellectual property in China, hardly ever goes ahead. Nearly all innovative efforts are in technology. And as I say, straitjacketed into this system. Much money is being poured by city governments into funding applications for patents. There are millions, over 1 million patent applications in the People's Republic of China every year. And my friends in the patent office readily admit that 70% are total nonsense, that they're not worth the paper that they're written on. So this is the objective, this is where creative energy is being hijacked to. Just have a look at these statistics. All right. Last year, 1.6 billion patent applications were filed. Now, it says 526,000 were invention patents. Well, what does that mean? In China, there are 3 sorts of patents. One is what we would call a standard patent, a patent for a new invention. The other is called a utility model, which is a smaller scale of invention with a shorter period of protection. And one is the industrial design, which is also protected under the patent system. So this large number includes the very large number of designs and of utility models. But look at this, only 17,500 international applications were filed under the PCT, a vanishingly small number. And that is because only those who have a really useful and really innovative invention will consider the expense of a PCT filing internationally. And this is a very good reflection of the disparity between genuine, meaningful innovations in China and the mass of stuff of the huge amount of energy that's being directed into filing under the patent system. In education and research, the biggest problem at the moment is the barriers between departments and universities. The barriers are much higher. I went 2 or 3 years ago to look at Chinese medicine. Now, it happens that one of the things I know personally about I don't know anything about Chinese medicine. I know quite a lot about horses. So after they gave me an introduction to some of their innovations in the area of Chinese acupuncture with needles, I said, well, how are you marketing this and developing it for animals and horses? And they said, oh no. No, we're a department of medicine, and that deals with people. And I said, yeah, I know, but what about animals? And they said, no, we deal with people. I said, yeah, okay, people, but what about the animals? Is anybody doing acupuncture for animals? No. We've never used acupuncture on animals. Wrong. China itself, in the 18th century, had whole handbooks for vets, traditional vets, on how to use acupuncture for animals. And any of you from Germany? I mean, acupuncture for horses is big business. If you want to really make a lot of money, learn to do acupuncture for horses, or dogs and cats. You made a load of money. They had no idea. This is the sort of barrier. And it's very interesting. I like to read a magazine called New Scientist, and you see how many Chinese names are working internationally on multidisciplinary research. The sort of researches that are impossible because of the barriers within China. It's also very important that in China you tend to have a sort of father-child relationship with your professor, and you don't question your professor. If you have done undergraduate studies under a professor at a university, it would be considered rather impolite to apply to do your PhD under another professor. Which means that people go through their educational development in a very, very narrow, closeted area. And the fields of research tend, rather than blossoming out and becoming multidisciplinary, get narrower and narrower and narrower. And this is another of the defects in the Chinese system. I won't spend much of this on this, because I actually think that I've already said that in China the intellectual property system is diverting a lot of the energy of creative effort. But where creative effort is successful and there are no innovations, they're not being protected. The laws are good, but the protection is poor. It is, in fact, there is no very clear mechanism in Chinese law for obtaining an award of damages under the civil system. So you can get a piece of paper saying that you have had your patent infringed and that you are entitled to damages, but you can't get the money very, very easily. Another extraordinary thing is that there is no law in China banning the introduction of forged evidence into court. I'm not going to speak, I'm aware of time, but I would just like you to know that in Hong Kong, which is part of China, of course, we have been promoting bottom-up a scheme called ICM Lite. ICM Lite is something for small and medium enterprises, and it's encouraging, through a sort of intellectual capital health check, an introduction for SMEs to the techniques of ICM. They get 6 hours service. ICM Lite is an ICM service in 6 hours only. If you can read the Q code there, it'll take you directly to the site where we have details of how that was run. And this actual effort was mainly an effort to market ICM, because I feel that as a group, we in the area of knowledge management and ICM have done rather a poor job of marketing. So the idea of this was to get across to small and medium enterprises, what is this thing ICM? What will it do for me? Why is it good for me? How long? How much will it cost? And this we did very successfully with 600 SMEs. And you can see that actually 24 of them wrote their own IC reports without any pressure from us. And those can also be found on that website. Some companies, you might say, well, what's the situation of intellectual capital management in the mainland? It's almost non-existent. Some company visits have been undertaken, and some academics, such as, for instance, Professor Jin in the People's University, or Professor Zhu Naixiao in Jinan University in Guangzhou, have done some studies of IC reporting. State Intellectual Property Office, SIPO, visited the Scottish IA Centre in 2010. And through the MAKE Awards, we generate some interest in knowledge management and ICM. But we find that the award winners very often, as far as the ICM element is concerned, they've read a few textbooks and they've tried to parrot or reproduce what they see in textbooks without any real in-depth effort to implement ICM. So, I look at this, but I just want to read back from Giovanni's 6 E's, Experience. China is not innovating in marketing. It is not innovating in the commercial experience, and it is not innovating particularly in services. A mayor of a city in China, a small town actually, not a city, said that he went to Europe and he realized that in China the colors used in all marketing were primary colors: red, green, yellow, blue. He had not experienced the wide use of non-primary colors in business. That type of innovation is not going on. Emotion. Well, you can see from President Hu Jintao's statement, what is the emotion? It is the emotion of fear. Innovation is being spurred as a result of an emotion of fear. Energy, as I have said, is being hijacked. It has been hijacked into the wrong straitjacket, the straitjacket of the patent system and the intellectual property system. And that means that the energy is not effectively driving innovation. It is driving a huge number of patent applications, many of which are not really of much use. Ethics. The ethic in China is the West was allowed to get away with making China suffer in the past. Why shouldn't China make the West suffer now? That's the ethics. That is what's behind intellectual property theft in China, in a sense. Well, people stole, the Chinese invented paper, but we never got any royalties from the West on that. So why shouldn't we rip off Microsoft? This is the sort of ethics that's behind the present sort of creative drive. Environment, outcomes and output. Yes, it is output driven. Every government official has to have his personal report produced every year. He wants numbers. He wants to say that his city or his province produced the greatest output of patent applications. Damn the outcome. Output is king. And engagement. The engagement of the people. This is the last comment I want to make, just in case It's not understood. The engagement of people, the relationship of a Chinese knowledge worker is firstly with the family. Secondly, with his professors and schoolmates. Thirdly, maybe, if he had that experience, the people he was in the army with, or the people he went to the country with in the Cultural Revolution. Somewhere down the list is his engagement with his corporation, with the country, and with his country. They go far down the list. So, in all of these 6 areas, then, there are negative factors that have to be overcome in China. I'd like to finish. I think I've overrun. Thank you very much, Shivani.
Thank you very much, Steve. And we have 5 minutes for some questions. Yes, because we can use this one. So please, if there is any question from the floor. And we have, please, there's one there. Thank you. Well, it's not very easy to get the microphone there. And is here, Robert. Thank you. If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Irina. I represent Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. I would like to hear your opinion on ways of organizing in China and their effects on innovation, because the relationships of mafia, blood, Guanji, are known to be very socially based and known to be prone to some extent to innovative capability and knowledge creation. Could that, in your opinion, perhaps outrun the negative bits? Could that help Chinese to become more innovative? Thank you.
Thank you. I talked about the fear that's inherent in the system, and the fear at the moment is of threats to the Communist Party. What I've started discussing, I can't say I got very far forward, is the organization of the Communist Party requires that people, the officials of the party called cadres, under the party system, the cadres go to something called a party school. The party school is a sort of business training school. Now, it used to be, 20 years ago, a school for a refresher course in Marxism-Leninism. Now, party school courses are about 10% Marxism-Leninism and 90% modern management and communications. I think one way to get, for instance, knowledge management and ICM introduced into the system without creating an organization which is separate outside the party system and therefore giving rise to a threat or a perceived threat, is to introduce ICM as a subject that could be taught just for a few hours maybe in party school. So organizationally, I think that's one thing you can do. And the other thing is, of course, much more time-consuming, bottom-up. Try and meet small and medium enterprises and introduce and get some engagement in the ideas of knowledge management and ICM in small and medium enterprises. Those, I think, are possibly the more viable methods that could be considered.
Question here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I am from Korea, Junior Joseph Yoon. I had several chances to visit China and interview China firms and China researchers and professors. In my opinion, China persons have the higher entrepreneurship in Asia countries. Between Asian countries, number one entrepreneurship they have. Business-oriented and business-oriented research. And at first step, they had a chance to meet businessmen in domestic. Foreign investor invested in China. At first step, they had a chance, several market experience in domestic. And now they have a chance to meet customers from worldwide. So, in my opinion, they had a fully market-oriented environment meeting chance. If extent, their future is not so negative, in my opinion, very positive in 6E aspects. How do you think about it? Thank you.
I agree that in terms of economic growth, there's still huge potential. Because as I explained from the demand side, there's adequate room for huge growth without innovation. As long as you can carry on manufacturing more and more and more at a relatively low price, you can grow. But as I also pointed out, you remember the demand and supply of labor, that is going to be an issue. And if they can't provide a mechanism for innovation and for moving up the value chain, that's going to be a bigger and bigger challenge in China. Now, because of the volume of China, because of the immense size, it's not going to be a crisis. It's going to be a gradually growing problem. But it's a problem which the leadership already understands. What they don't understand is, what do we do next? It's possible that some entrepreneurs will simply lead off, like the ones that you've mentioned, the ones who have excellent exposure overseas. Maybe they've studied in overseas universities and they've come back. There are more and more of those. And interestingly, in local government, there are more and more Chinese people who have worked abroad in overseas corporations coming back to work in local government and even in national government. For instance, the Deputy Commissioner of the Chinese Passion Office, Yu Guang, has worked for 5 years with Siemens in Germany. So there is potential, but there are so many problems. I see that there are so many barriers to innovation that I think that the challenge is going to become greater and greater. But it certainly won't appear overnight. You're quite correct. There's a lot of other things that can be done because of the volume of trade that China engages in.
Okay, thank
Do you have time for another question? Well, there are many questions. I think we can take just one.
I was already here.
Okay, there are many questions. We will. It's good. We will have some time for doing the coffee break. So apologize if I cannot take all.
Okay, I'm Pekka Kahrian from Finland. Your analysis about the weakness in the patent policy of the Chinese was sort of that the shortage of filing international patents was their weakness, and focusing on the domestic patents was a mistake. Could that also be viewed that as preparing for the future where the consumption and markets are? So the Chinese are focusing on protecting intellectual capital in China in order to keep competition away and not having as much interest in having international patents. Could that be also interpreted that way?
Well, China is favoured by a very large internal market, but your question implies some sort of consciousness of that issue. I don't think there is any consciousness. I think the real issue is that the huge volume of national filings is of patents and innovations of such low quality that they could not possibly survive and compete in the international environment. And therefore, people realistically, because it takes, it takes many thousands of US dollars to file international applications with the PCT, and people are realistically understanding that, that only a very small proportion of those patents are actually worth filing in the international market. And of course, as you know, those patents which are filed in the mainland but not filed abroad have no protection abroad. They can be copied immediately without any bad result.
Well, this is fascinating. Thank you, Steve, for your presentation. Let's give a hand.
Thank you.
Steve.